Before I get into the story, I want to apologise for not publishing a chapter for a while. I was busy working on making a short indie horror game. Unfortunately, I met loads of dead ends, so I'm putting it on hold to focus on my writing. So I'm hoping to start writing the story in advance and narrate it in advance. So I just want to say sorry for taking so long to publish next chapter. So let's just get to the story, and I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 20: The Shadow of Foresight. It was Gain's scorching hot. Sweat dripped from Vanna's as he struggled to keep a grip of Voilin, who leaned heavily on his shoulder. His body felt weak and thirsty as he squinted at the sky, the harsh sunlight piercing his eyes. Suddenly, a sharp jab pressed against his back. Valen spun around, glaring at Myrin, who returned the look with equal intensity. With his free hand, Vanis rifled through his bag. To his relief, he found a water bottle. He was about to gulp it down the last of it when, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Myron's gaze fixed on the bottle. With a heavy sigh, he lowered it and handed it over. Myron snatched it quickly, drinking deeply before passing the remainder back to Vanis, who finished it off and returned the empty bottle to his bag. Myron walked ahead, spear in hand, leading the way. Vanis called after her. Can you show me the location so I can mark it in my Gamelit, just in case we get separated, and I need to bring Boylan there? Myron turned to Vanis, giving him an icy glare, as she muttered under her breath, I will not show you where my people are. I don't know anything about you. Vanis muttered under his breath. Fine. Silence followed, and after a moment, Myron broke it. So, tell me what brings you here, and how did you get this far? Vanis responded, You're right. I'm not from this world. The game brought me here. Beyond that, I survived. That's all you need to know. In the distance, Vanis spotted the flicker of firelight. His pace quickened, and as he neared the fire, he noticed people. The clothes they wore made his skin crawl. His eyes met Voilin's, who returned his gaze. Then he glanced at Myron, who had stopped walking. She turned to him, tilting her head to the side. Without warning, she drew her spear and aimed it at him. From behind, Valis heard a voice, one that seemed eerily familiar. The voice shouted, You must die. I can't let you live any longer. Before Vanis could react, he felt intense heat spreading over his body. Looking down, his eyes widened in horror. The flames were already consuming him. He dropped to the ground, rolling frantically to put out the fire. Through the flames, he glimpsed a shadowy figure. Sanitas emerged from the darkness, advancing towards him with a dark, sinister glare. His hand outstretched. Vanis felt the sneering heat of the flames intensifying. Through the flickering fire, he saw a shadow approaching. The next thing he knew, Sanitas was standing over him, sword in hand, ready to strike. But, just as Sanitas was about to deliver the blow, a light appeared in the corner of Vanis' vision. Sanitas paused, then calmly sheathed his sword, his face emotionless, before walking away without a word. Taking the opportunity, Vanis rolled on the ground, desperately trying to extinguish the flames. The pain was unbearable, and soon he slipped into unconsciousness, haunted by the flashback of his family and home. When Vanis finally woke, he found himself in a hospital bed, dressed in a gown, his body covered in burns. His arms were bandaged, and his once hairy legs were now bare, scorched from the fire. While the pain was still present, it wasn't as severe as before. Gingerly touched his wounds, wincing as he sat up in bed, scanning the room for anything familiar. Spotting his phone on the nearby table, he reached for it, only to realise the frustration that the battery was dead. Letting out a sigh, he climbed out of the bed, searching for his clothes, but found nothing. He wrapped the gown tighter around himself and walked into the hospital corridor. relieved that, at least for the time being, he was fully covered, and as he walked through the breezy corridor, he couldn't help but feel self-conscious, aware that people were staring at him. Glancing down at his burned legs, he rushed to the nearby counter, looking for something, anything that could give him a sense of time. Grabbing the newspaper, he scanned the date, only to discover that 10 months had passed. The paper slipped from his hand as his mind clouded with dread. Numb, Vanlis wandered into the bathroom, finding a stall where he collapsed to the ground, cradling his head in his hands. His thoughts spiraled. Time has passed so quickly in this world. Will he suffer the same fate as Val did? Shaking himself, he pressed a hand against the cold toilet seat, pulling himself up. Slowly, he opened the stall door and walked into the mirror. His breath caught in his throat as he studied his reflection, but to his relief, his face remained unchanged. Without wasting another moment, he rushed out of the hospital and headed home. As he walked along the familiar roads, his heart skipped a beat, but just as he was about to continue forward, his feet froze. He turned to look at the hospital entrance, an uneasy feeling tugging at him. Quickening his pace, Vannis returned to the hospital, back through the corridor, and entered one of the dorm rooms. He hesitated as he approached a bed. Dragging back the curtain, there, still asleep, was his father. Vannis lowered his head with a heavy sigh of relief. Vannis sat on the chair in silence, staring at his father, his hand trembling as he gently touched his father's arm, stroking it before letting his hand fall to his side. He sat there, eyes hollow, his mind void of thought. With tears welling up, he buried his head in his arms and cried quietly. After a while, he slowly stood up, kissed his father's forehead, and left the hospital. As soon as he stepped outside, he rushed to the bike stalls. Without hesitation, he grabbed the bike and sped home. When he arrived, Vannis burst through the door, slipped into the bedroom to get changed, and then entered the kitchen. He saw his mother standing there, her eyes wide, her mouth agape. She stared at him in stunned silence. Sensing her hesitation, Vannis approached carefully and spoke. "Mom, are you okay?" His mother stood frozen for a moment and then suddenly rushed forward, wrapping her arms tightly around him. Tears streamed down her face as she held him close. Vannis gently held her back, wondering what had happened during the time he was trapped in the game world. He gently pulled back, and his mother muttered, almost in disbelief, "How can this be?" Evelyn looked at Vannis with watery eyes and asked, "Are you okay? When did you wake up and how?" Vannis smiled weakly. "I'm fine. I woke up not too long ago. I saw Dad first, then I came straight here. I mean, I'm fine, really. But what happened?" Before he could finish, a loud screech pierced the air. Vannis cried out in pain, clutching his ears as he collapsed to the ground. The next thing he saw was a vision of his TV screen flickering, cracking, and shattering into pieces. Muttering on his breath, he whispered, "No." Then everything went dark. Vannis woke up in the pitch-black forest, in agony. His clothes were scorched, and fresh burns covered his legs and arms. Disorientated, he looked around but saw no sign of Marion, Violin, or Xanathus. The rustling of the leaves nearby made him tense. With shaky hands, he reached out for his sword, eyes fixed on the source of the noise. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Violin. Her pale arms and weakened hands trembled as she slowly approached him. She knelt beside him, gently crushing ingredients into a bowl, her movements slow and deliberate. She glanced at Vannis and gestured towards the potion she was preparing. Vannis gave a faint nod. Violin carefully applied the mixture of his burnt skin. He winced in pain, the sting overwhelming, and then everything faded as he lost consciousness again. When he vaguely regained his senses, he caught a glimpse of Violin's wavy violet hair, and her hand faintly glowing. He slipped back into sleep. When he finally woke fully, he saw Violin sitting against a tree, silently watching him. So that's the end of the chapter. And like I said, I'm writing ahead and hopefully publish these chapters quite regularly. I do want to apologise again for the very long delay. I was busy making a game, which I will do once as soon as this book is done. At least first draft is done. If you're curious to know what the game is a first person horror game. It's called Separated by Nightmares. Last Stand. If you are interested and want to help me out, you can wishlist the game. It will dramatically help me on launch day. So that's basically what I've been working on the last while. I've been trying to make progress in the game. It's taking a lot than I planned. So I'm going back to writing. And I hope you enjoyed the story. And if you do, please follow if there's a follow button. I look forward to have the chapter next week. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a good day.